Well, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folarin. We talk about the economy, in particular, inflation. It's no news by now. The Nigerian Bureau of Statistics has put out there that inflation rate has jumped year on year between July last year and now. And so we're at what they are calling a near record, well, it's a record high, but what, almost 17% or something like that. But we'll get to the nuts and bolts of it. Just to understand the figure, 19.64% in July. It's an almost 17-year high, we are told. You might not have noticed because you live from one day to the next. But between July last year and now, we now have it's as high as 19.64%. So we'll look into this and how we got here. Quite frankly, how did we get here? My guests this morning, experts, both of them, on a subject matter like this. First of all, away, that is to say, remotely, is Economist and immediate past Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also CEO, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Good morning to you, Dr. Yusuf.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Yes, sir. And in studio here, we got Mr. Ayodeji. Mr. Ayodeji is also an economist. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having
Mr. Ayodeji. Okay. It's not as if it's the easiest subject to wrap your mind around, because what it just seems like to most people who have heard the word inflation is what? They go to their local bucateria, shall we say, and they want to be modest about it and say, Madam, give me 100 naira rice. And the woman says, there's no 100 naira rice anymore. And what you will get for what you used to get with 100 naira is now going to be starting at 200 naira. That's Bushman economics for you, just to sort of understand it. But we understand that generally speaking, inflation around the world is caused by certain factors, and we'll see how ours match those or differ from those. But generally speaking, if inflation is going to be good, if you can put it like that, then it won't be into double digits. Maybe that means it gives you up from 1 to 9% inflation rate. But here we are at 19.64. I'm done with my own economics. Let me ask the experts. Let me start with Dr. Muda Yusuf remotely. Dr. Yusuf, double-digit inflation, we are not a stranger to that, but as high as 19.64%, as we are told. Give me your economic viewpoint on how bad this is. Is it a tragedy, or is it, we can fix it?
Thank you, Uncle Yori. Well, this is an extremely disturbing situation. Very, very troubling, because we have not seen this kind of galloping inflation in a very long time. There are complaints all over. There are pains being experienced, either at the level of the citizens or at the level of businesses. In reality, the figure of 19.64% inflation rate is even grossly understating the severity of the situation. Because by this figure, we are assuming that between last year and now, average prices have moved only by 20%.
That's right. That's right.
But if you look at the practical experience that we are going through, particularly if you take into account the basket of goods that the average Nigerian consumes, we're talking of inflation that is between 50 to 100% in the last 1 year. What that means is that for most of the goods that the average Nigerian consumes, in some cases, prices have doubled. In some cases, prices have gone up by as high as 50%. So talking about 19.6%, even to demand on the street, is still understating the matter. Take the price of food, for instance. Whether you are talking of garri, you are talking of beans, you are talking of palm oil, in many of these instances, prices have doubled. Take the prices of even energy. Just like cooking gas. Cooking gas today is over 10,000 naira. These are basic things. And for those who have medical conditions, talk to them.
Oh.
They will tell you what is happening to the prices of pharmaceutical products. They're not talking about 20% increase. So it's a very, very serious matter.
Indeed.
And of course, there are all manner of factors. I heard you talk about global factors, but there are also domestic factors.
Okay.
There are factors that are also as a result of our own making.
You know, I'm going to come back to you.
That's worsened the global issues.
Okay. Dr. Yusuf, thank you very much. I'm going to come back to you for more on what you've just said, that whereas there are global factors, generally speaking, so that what affects you is going to affect your neighbor, talking about countries now. What you've just said, we'll come back to it, and I want to bring that aspect of the conversation to Mr. Ayodeji. So he was just talking about our own factors locally. You hear about, he touched on that a bit, you hear about food inflation, for instance. Could you talk to us about our own factors? Because really, I was going to ask the question somewhere along the line, is there something that we ourselves are not doing right? In other words, in a country where, jocularly speaking, people will blame Buhari if there's too much rain. You know, people will blame Buhari if it's too dry. This one, can anybody legitimately blame the administration in power?
Well, we have a lot of factors, as Dr. Lawa said, apart from the global factors. We've been in this for quite a while. The last 2 years has been quite difficult. And the implication is that if you have 1,000 naira 12 months ago, the value of that 1,000 naira is about 20% off. So technically, if you have kept your 1,000 naira 1 year ago, you are holding 800.
Exactly.
But that's even making it look good. From what he has said, we probably, if you review the basket which is used to compete inflation, if you review it, make a little adjustment here and then, you discover that indeed inflation rate may be as high as 60% or thereabouts. Some analysts put it at 40% or thereabouts. The reality is that if you're earning 10,000 naira last year, the value of your real income is coming close to less than 20% of what you're earning. So if you're unfortunate not to have a pay rise, at this time, you are worse off. You are poorer than you were last year. That's fundamental. Then how does it affect the living condition of the people? That means the things they can buy now, they have reduced considerably. If you're able to spend 10 naira on food before, you can only afford 8 naira or less. So what are the factors that have contributed to this very terrible situation? You begin to talk about government policies, not just now. There's a build-up to this. How did we allow supply of essential items to nosedive to this point? How did we allow the cost of production to be this high? We have a lot of factors. One of them is that we are not producing. And why are we not producing? We are not producing because the factors that will hit production are not there. We are talking about infrastructure. The more we do, the less we have. We are talking about insecurity. We are talking about food inflation. Food inflation cannot be adequately addressed until you resolve the the insecurity problem. Nobody goes to farm where you know a bandit is lurking around the corner to kidnap you or take you to hiding. So these are the factors.
And all of this leads to the fact that you are not producing.
We can't produce in an environment of chaos, in an environment of insecurity, in an environment of high uncertainty.
Well, if you're not producing, and let me go back to Dr. Yusuf. I think I've heard it said once that one way of looking at inflation again is is it? Did they say too much money chasing too few goods, and therefore there is inflation? I don't know whether that is relevant in this context here. But just looking at the example of insecurity in the land, farmers can't do their work, so food is not where it needs to be. Talk to me about aspects domestically that you sort of broached earlier that are fueling this inflation.
Now, I agree with my colleague, Ayodeji. The issue is that we have what we call structural factors. Structural factors are factors that impact on productivity and competitiveness of production. So within the structural factors, you will situate things like issues of power, failure of the public power supply. You know how many times we have had the collapse of national grid this year. That's never been that bad. You have the issues of transportation, logistics, because even if you produce, you have to get it across to the market. So the challenge of connectivity between the farming locations and the market is also an issue. It impacts on production. But outside the structural factors, there are also policy factors. And one of the areas of policy issues is the exchange rate. Across all segments of this economy, there's a lot of complaints, a lot of anguish around the depreciation of the currency. Today, we are talking of a currency of almost at about 650 naira to the dollar. That's the time it got to 700 naira to the dollar. These things have very severe implications for inflation. And as an oil-producing country, this is the time we should be having a very strong currency. This is the time that our reserve should be overflowing. That is what is happening to all other oil-producing countries. Because they are taking advantage of the high oil price. So when we even talk about global conditions, we should even be benefiting from the global developments. Because oil price has gone up. The last time we had this situation, you remember the Gulf War period? We knew how much we gained from the high oil price. Look at what is happening to other countries. Saudi Aramco, look at the kind of profit they are making. Even in Europe, they are talking about prosperity tax for oil companies. So as a country and as an oil-producing country, it's a tragedy that we are having this kind of foreign exchange crisis.
Indeed. One moment, please, Dr. Yusuf.
At the heart of this is also the foreign exchange problem.
Exactly.
You have the depreciation of the foreign exchange. You have the scarcity of foreign exchange. Talk to most manufacturers. They can't even get the foreign exchange to procure their raw materials. No matter what percentage of your input is imported, if you can't get it, you cannot have a product. So the foreign exchange is an issue, and it's a policy issue. Okay. It's a domestic problem.
Let me come back to you, Doctor.
Have this energy
Let me come back to
energy issue.
Let me come back to you, Dr. Yusuf. In studio here, Mr. Ayodeji, he touched on, what is going on in the oil sector. First of all, we're not. I'm sure that the fact that we do not refine our own oil must also be playing into this. Maybe that's one aspect of some of the policy issues that he said, because many Nigerians, maybe experts know why, many Nigerians simply cannot understand why is it that we sit down and do not make efforts to, refine our own crude. So we ship out our crude, they refine it over there, we bring it back in. Of course, no, this is not a Father Christmas. This is a business enterprise. And so it is costing us what it is costing us. Now, people have had many suggestions as to how to go about this. But Dr. Yusuf also touched on infrastructure. Now, this government will boast about one thing, and it's not a casual boast, efforts in infrastructure up and down the land. has this quest for improved infrastructure been a double-edged sword such that other areas of our living survival has been affected by this infrastructure drive, which, let it be said, it's ours. When President Buhari goes, it belongs to the country, but it is his efforts that brought it all about. So explain to us, if you will, that whole infrastructure bit that is going to pay us, but I don't know at the moment what it's doing.
Okay, thank you, Yori. I agree absolutely with Dr. Yusuf's position. The biggest problem which we've had in the last 7 years is at the level of policy. There's either the policies are not well properly looked at, or the unintended consequences of such policies were not properly evaluated. So if you talk about at the level of policies, we've had a very difficult period as a country. We've not been able to integrate the policies we've introduced to achieve the results we wanted to achieve. For instance, borders were closed. The unintended consequences of closing the border has been bigger than the benefits we would have gained from it. It's practically shut down the economy. And if you look at most of the policies which we've had under this government, for instance, in the last 7 years in particular, you discover that they are not the policies that boost or buttress or allow the economy to move freely. They are not policies that open up the economy. They are not policies that are really, really dealing with the main problems of the economy. For instance,
sorry, sir. As a Bushman, I'm inclined to interject. So what is Vice President Osinbajo doing, who is heading up the economic team?
Well, I'll probably get to that if I have enough time to dwell on that. So, for instance, you've closed the border. Months, years later, you opened it. What have you achieved? You've not been able to give accounts to the country. Nothing was achieved. We went through so much pains, then we have no gain.
But he said it was because of so many leakages that was hurting us, that they were doing us the service of, shutting the border, cutting off the leaks.
The leakages are still there. And I would go back to what Dr. Lawal said earlier.
Dr. Yusuf.
Yusuf Lawal said earlier. The problem we have is when you shut down the border, you limit, you hinder free flow of trade between two countries. You want to have this, you don't want to have that, you begin to discriminate and go. Unfortunately, those policies didn't work because we have porous borders.
Did it hurt them as well? Those we shut our border against?
A little, but it's all small because we have porous borders.
Okay.
Where you don't have effective border policing, you don't lock your border because those items are still finding their ways in. And you don't have to contend with smuggling. Smuggling is more expensive because people will pay more for those items. Government will hire nothing in terms of tariff and revenue and all the like. So it's been double tragedy for the economy. You close the border, people can't do legitimate business. You open up, you allow those who work at the back end in the black market and go to do it. And that's one thing that has been affecting the value of the naira, really. Government is living in denial over the size, the magnitude, the impact of the foreign exchange that is taking place in the black market, in the unregulated market. That market has unfortunately become more effective than even government-regulated markets. And the impact is more potent than what we have there. Now, I'll give you an instance. In the last 1 month or thereabouts, we've had about 20, 30, 40% increase in prices of tomato. Then at a point last month, importation came to the rescue. They brought in tomato from Cameroon and from Benin Republic, which is called adjacent tomato, whatever. Market started reflecting increased in supply gradually. Then prices started coming in. As of today, it's better because we are bringing in from the north to Lagos, which is technically the biggest consumers market in West Africa. So what you have over the years, the moment black market rate went up to 650, the prices of tomato will go up in Lagos markets. But government will live in dinner and say foreign exchange is 420 to $1, not 650. So a lot of loopholes. The leakages in terms of policies, we've not been able to address them. Then you talk about energy crisis, which you talked about. How come we are in a period of boom and we're experiencing doom?
That's what many people don't understand.
How did government allow oil output to drop to as low as 1 million barrels per day? Oh, but why are people losing so much? Why are explorers losing so much?
So we're not actually meeting our quota.
We are not meeting our quota. We are losing about 300 barrels of oil to theft every day. And government appears incapacitated.
Dr. Yusuf, first of all, I wonder, do you agree with Mr. Ayodeji that policies, the policy room, if to use it like that, somehow didn't quite get it right, especially with unintended consequences? And I thought economists are, well, maybe I shouldn't say that. You would imagine that they should look long term, what the action is likely to be. And so do you, first of all, accept that some aspects of our policy making didn't get it right?
I agree absolutely with him. You see, we have a policy formulation framework that doesn't seem to be given opportunities for the inputs, first, of the stakeholders in the economy, and secondly, of the technocrats. That is what I can see, because the quality of policy is also a major problem. He talked about foreign exchange. The level of corruption that we experience now in the foreign exchange market, particularly the official window, currently is almost unprecedented because of the huge margin between the official exchange rate and the parallel market rate. They are talking of a margin of almost 250 naira to the dollar. And because of that, there is so much pressure on the foreign exchange market, such that even people who have no business with seeking foreign exchange are there getting even better priority than people who even really need it, because they have influence. And all these things are happening because there's so much premium. Imagine somebody, if you can cross $1 million from the official window to the parallel market window, you'll be making almost 200 million naira. How many people in production can make that kind of money?
Exactly. And
that is the window that has been created, that is creating a whole lot of distortions. Yet, the CBN is almost completely silent about the fact that this is a problem. They are busy chasing the BDCs, busy chasing Aboki FX and all of that. And because the CBN has fixed this exchange rate as an artificially low level, all the foreign exchange that's supposed to come into the economy through other sources, like the foreign direct investment, like the foreign portfolio investment, even export proceeds, foreign exchange from oil, many of these things are not coming. If they are coming, they are not coming through the official channel.
Yeah.
So we now have an economy where we are now rationing foreign exchange. We are now micromanaging the economy.
One moment, Dr. Yusuf. Let me bring
all the sectors.
I beg your pardon. Let me bring to Kayode Ayodeji. Let me bring to him that question of establishing and maintaining an artificially low exchange rate, such that it's now created this disparity. Just as the good doctor said, I don't know if it's exactly round tripping. You are connected. You pull $100 million out, and you make a killing. First of all, this keeping the artificially low exchange rate. Explain the reasoning behind that, such that we have this what is referred to as parallel markets.
Well, I think the situation is more precarious than what an analyst would like to express in the studio.
Lest be seen as a prophet of doom.
Yes, the situation is quite precarious. You don't want to stand there as if you are raising alarm. It seems the economy is heading towards Zimbabwe, or is heading towards a very dangerous bend. We've never had it this bad, that you have that large gap between the two markets. And the reality is, number one, government must wake up to the reality that there is a big, they said it's just 3% of the foreign exchange markets. Well, it seems to be the controlling factor in pricing, leading to high level of inflation. When you have huge gaps between the two markets, there is just natural inclination is to move from A to speculate and make money in B.
Yeah.
And it's so
simple to do.
seamless.
Is it
you
simple
don't
to
even
do?
see government talking about it. You don't even seem to see the regulators saying, if you do this, these are the penalties, as we used to have. Under Obasanjo, he made a scapegoat of two banks. I won't mention the names of those banks on here. Immediately, he moved against
But I
those
don't know
things.
why
Under
you
the
people
former,
do this kind of thing. Why you choose not to mention the name
no,
of this thing?
we are talking about brands that we don't have any intention of damaging, really.
But they did it.
But the moment CBN governor, Sanusi, the first Sanusi, moved against some banks, made scapegoat of them, all of them just adjusted. Everybody knew it would not be business as usual.
Okay.
But we are in a terrain whereby the suspicion is that government is pretending to be unaware of the havoc, the huge gap between the two markets are causing. And government now pretend as if my focus is on the regulated markets. Dollar is just 420. Who are the people accessing the regulated market? You are traveling abroad. You are entitled to BTA. These are elitist consumptions. These are elitist items. What about those who don't have the privilege of doing that, of accessing those markets? Their basic needs, clothing, food, housing, you've practically shut them out of that benefit.
Exactly.
So you can't continue to
Because
create an economy that is just to take care of just a tiny minority of the population. You need to open it up. You need to now look at how do we get this benefit, if at all it must exist. Left to many analysts who say, no, the gap is under any circumstance shouldn't be like this. Create a market where you have 2-3% divergence between the two markets, where there is little or no room for round tripping. And if you do that, you discover that virtually every remittance coming into the country, whether from diaspora, from foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment, will begin to settle into a common pool.
Indeed.
That will boost the reserves, that will boost the value of the naira.
Let me ask Dr. Yusuf, why is such a quote-unquote simplistic route not taken? Why is government keeping this wide disparity between the two rates?
Well, some of these things are difficult to explain because this is not rocket science, and economics is a science, even though it's a social science, which implies that you can easily predict outcomes when you take a particular policy step. But for some strange reasons, and it's really very strange, that the CBN had continued to remain very rigid on this policy. So I cannot say that it's out of ignorance, because I know that they are very brilliant economists at the CBN. They have a very robust research department, and they have respected economists. It is also possible that it's a political economy issue. Political economy in the sense that there are people who are benefiting from this particular policy condition who don't want to let go. And if that is the situation, then that is a very big tragedy.
Because that will question the sincerity of leadership. That would question the sincerity of leadership.
What the nation is suffering as a result of this policy failure, as it were. So it's either a question of self-interest. That is what I think. Some people are benefiting from it, and they don't want to, because the lapses, the challenges are so obvious. They are so obvious.
You know, and you wouldn't think it.
And yet nobody is talking about it, even at the MPC meeting.
Okay.
I've not heard, even from their MPC communique, no reference is made to this terribly wide gap between the official window and the parallel market window.
Okay. Dr. Yusuf, one moment, please.
Recognize the parallel market.
I beg your pardon. One moment, please. I've got to take a break now. We're going to come back, and we bear in mind what we've been told by our two economists explaining all of these scarce resources. But you wouldn't think it if you just cast your glance over the polity. Politicians are spending dollars. Politicians have no problem coming up with a whole stack of dollars, that very scarce dollars. And we're having a chat with two economists, Dr. Muda Yusuf, immediate past Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI. And that is a sector that really, really feels this because a lot of the inputs have to be sourced in dollars. And in studio here, Mr. Ayodeji, an economist as well. Now, what we've been learning, what we've been hearing on the program about the dollar and the scarcity of it and the resultant effect on the naira, poor naira being pummeled all over the place. But social media is awash with people spraying dollars. You know, I mentioned earlier that for some reason politicians, you know, are now dealing. Politicians can show their level by spending dollars. Maybe regular level will spend naira, but if you're going to move up, you know, and at the rate of now almost 700, well, it's come back, as the Dr. Yusuf was saying, it's come down to around 600 and something. Explain that. These very scarce dollars that LCCI and those kind of people need for survival, it's in scarce supply. But for playing, there seems to be enough of it to at least booger. I think the terminology is go ahead and booger them. And so it sounds crazy, but what's going on there where dollars for frivolous activities seem to be available, but for hardcore activities meant for our survival, it's scarce?
Well, I would avoid saying that we have a failure of regulation. I would rather say inefficiency of regulation. The regulatory system doesn't seem to be working. If I thought it's working, it's not working efficiently.
Okay, one moment, please. Forgive me for interrupting you. Benga has called in from Abuja. Good morning, Benga.
Good morning, Mr. Yori.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Yusuf.
Thank you.
I don't know the name of the other guest.
The guest in studio is Ayodeji, and Dr. Muda Yusuf is with us remotely.
Yes. Dr. Yusuf, good morning, and Mr. Ayodeji. I'm interested in this discussion. I'm into ICT, and everything about ICT will get outside this country. Really, the issue of this dollar rate today, that is very astronomical. But Mr. Yusuf, I will not tell you where. You have not, or any of them, have not given us the solution. What can government do to bridge the gap, to bring dollar to, because before the coronavirus pandemic, dollar was about 350 something naira. How the pandemic is going to 450, 500. Immediately CBN, so they will not give dollar to do the change. From 455 to 500 or 540 to 600 plus. So I want them to tell us, does it mean that decision for CBN to say they will not more sell give dollar to speak to bring the change? Is it for some assault? Do they now reverse to it, or what is the decision? Secondly, the other market, the export window, meant for exporters and manufacturers and the rest. The dollar, should they take it now to the market rate? So say, okay, anything now is about market, about 600 plus. Would that not affect productivity, manufacturing, and the rest of it? Because to me, it's like government is very confused that if you go this way, it affects these people. If you go this way, they are economists. I'm a layman. So the president explained to them what the government has done. That policy of not going to CB to put it in a bad policy, and what the government do now?
Okay.
That's my question.
Thank you very much. We've talked about policy, you know, but please respond.
Okay, I would say that we got into this problem. This problem started when government decided to fix the exchange rate at 197 to $1 in 2015, and at that time the challenge was naira was grossly overpriced, overvalued. if you're an investor coming in to do business in Nigeria, you draw your econometrics analysis and co, you can fairly come to a conclusion that the worth of $1 is so a month. But unfortunately, even at the time when we were earning close to nothing from oil, the president insisted that Naira should be sold at 197 to $1. That did not reflect the intrinsic or the real fair value of the Naira at that time. So foreign investors started having doubts about our ability to make the right decisions.
One moment, please. Why would anybody, it is the president in this case, insist on such a treatment of the Naira?
Well, he probably thought, in his wisdom, he thought by not allowing the Naira to be devalued by enemies, he was protecting the economy, and that's ignorance. He probably thought he was protecting the common man who would probably buy things at a higher value. But it's a little deeper than that. It's a little more complicated than that. The free interplay of market forces cannot be hindered too much. You have to allow the interplay of the market forces. In this context, demand and supply for dollar, you have to make sure that it reflects reality. Of course, CBN has been intervening, and CBN is not ready to have a free flow of the currency. So what CBN should have done at that time was to make sure that you adjust the value of the Naira consistently, marginally, to reflect earnings from oil or the rates at which you are earning dollars from abroad, because we don't mint dollars. But CBN adamantly, because they wanted to go by what the president said, kept the dollar at 197. And before we could say Jack Robinson, foreign investors started withdrawing and started having doubt about the ability to meet the expectations, ability to protect the investments. That was a major problem. So that led to the gap, the huge gap between the two markets. And they brought in what they call prohibition list. I think by now CBN, the fiscal authorities too, would know that those things are not working. If you have prohibition lists, let it be at the level of prohibition list, not telling CBN to keep prohibition list. Let customs and all of them, border control agencies, deal with that. It is not in the interest of government to say essential items are put on border list when you have porous, or prohibition list when you have porous borders. This is what they have done. If you are bringing in rice or anything from abroad, you don't get dollars for it, or you don't do anything like we used to have when in the past, before 2015, government would give concession and say, we want to regulate the price of rice. And it comes out to policy again. Government intervention has not been price-led. It does not have any price target. That, okay, if we want to have a rice policy, what's the target for a bag of rice, a 50 kg of rice? We'll make sure that our intervention, our rice revolution, puts the price of rice not above certain band. That's been missing. So invariably, government has been intervening to feed producers at the expense of suppliers.
Okay,
so government intervention is not getting to the end users, the consumers, is terminating at the level of production.
I don't know if this is also under the category, the subheading of unintended consequences of some actions. Ada in Jos, apologies for keeping you waiting, but I wanted him to land on that particular explanation. Good morning to you, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Yori and your guest. Ada calling from Jos. I'm not an economist, at least I know basic one, from what they discussed. Now we are shifting what is happening to us to the war in Ukraine. The war we have here, this all the banditry, terrorists, kidnappers, you name it, is worse than the war in Ukraine. Can you imagine a country that has very strong economy? I was surprised. 16 ships loaded, moving to whatever they said is moving from the Black Sea to supply grain from Ukraine. Can you imagine? And we're talking about that sometimes we want to punch the box to them. That is what is our problem. Whereas the real problem is that we have clumsy economic policies. How can we have two different exchange rates? In fact, if you're connected with them, the people there, you don't even have to go to that your studio, Mr. Yori. You don't sell your house and become a billionaire. With 50%, or 100% gap. What are you talking about? Must I be a CBN governor to know that? The day I heard that, I was screaming. Then what I was talking about, when it was shot, I screamed. What are you shooting? You shot out the border. I shot out the northern borders. All about 1,000 irregular ones. We are open. But for us, then we have the highest smuggling going on. And we said we shut down borders. What are we talking about? You know, what is all these policies of ourselves in this country? Then you have the power. Power is what drives an economy. Every time the grid is collapsing. Tell me the country that has only one grid, a federation, a country that is practicing federalism, that has one centralized grid. How they decentralize it? What is it? I can't understand the whole scenario.
Indeed.
Insecurity, the same thing. We have we don't want to decentralize the police. Just because Buhari told the National Assembly that having a state police is not the option. They all backed out. The minorities didn't have any voice. For how long will we continue like this? All they say, what we should not pray for is that I'm not expecting anything again. I'm not expecting anything again. Let us just pray for us to have a credible election. That's what we should focus on. You know, everybody, I mean, the situation is as if it's past praying for, but God forbid. All the same, let's not do it about this country. It's not really unfortunate. God bless you.
Thank you very much for calling in, Ada. And I think the anger that is discernible in your voice, it really is with a lot of Nigerians who, as you put it, paraphrasing what you said, simply don't understand it any longer. Dr. Yusuf, you see the incongruity of what we're talking about now, how scarce the dollar is, yet we read reports. Government seems to have physical, and the dollar is being spent frivolously locally. In fact, it got to a time when I think government had to issue a warning. Some realtors were actually asking for their dues, rents in dollars, not in naira anymore. So corruption, the corruption aspect of this, how big an issue is that? Because you hear that, and we don't see, in fact, not very many people see the $5, $10, $20 bills. It's the $100 bill. That's it just shows you how easy it is, quote unquote, to get your hands on it, that people now come out and use to flex. They might say this is an insignificant percentage of it, but it doesn't look like we have a problem, looking at the way our citizens carry on.
Well, the issue of corruption, I think that's a completely different matter entirely.
Okay.
That is, of course, it's a very big issue. It's a major leadership issue. There are all manner of leakages in the management of our public finances. I mean, the most recent, you see what is happening with the Accountant General's case.
Yes.
The former Accountant General. They are talking of over 100 billion. They are now also proposing about plea bargain, which is an admission of guilt in a way. I don't want to preempt what the judges will say. But that is a reflection of how bad things are. So whether you are talking in dollar terms or in naira terms, corruption remains a very big issue. So when you see all these monies flying around, they are all a process of corruption. One way or the other, these things are coming from the purse of the state,
okay,
from the treasury of government,
exactly.
Whether at subnational or at the national level. That is what it is.
Okay.
But beyond this forex thing, I think we also need to broaden the scope of discussion. Now, we have a situation where we are spending almost $15 billion importation of petroleum products. We are an oil-producing country. That is putting a whole lot of pressure also on the foreign exchange market. So we need to address that. That's a major issue.
Indeed.
I mean, with due respect, this government has been there going to 8 years now. And even more the story is the fact that the president himself is the minister of petroleum. And yet, our refineries have all collapsed.
Okay. One moment, please. I've got to bring in, sorry, I apologize for interrupting you. Joseph in Owo has been holding on. Good morning to you, Joseph.
Good morning. How are you, sir?
Yes, sir. Good morning. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you so much, sir. You do a very good job there. Good morning to economists on the program. What I want to point out quickly, because of time. Number one, Nigeria will need to take away some of those things that can make life meaningful to us, take them away from the exclusive list. Number one, power needed to be taken away from the exclusive floor of the federal government. If that is done, and so many of these states can look for investors to go into power projects and then not taking it back to the national grid, then we can have power at this level to power so much of these SMBs. Development must be bottom up. Development is not from Abuja to Owo. It should be from Owo to all those states and then to Nigeria. That is number one. Number two, and let me talk about those things that are very, very realistically that we can go into. Now, we're celebrating that some ships are leaving Ukraine because of the peace agreement brokered by the United Nations between Russia and Ukraine. That should be shameful. We should be ashamed celebrating grain coming from Ukraine when those states can produce corn that can feed Nigeria throughout the year, 4 months. We can harvest 3 times in a year if proper effort get towards helping the agri sector at the local level. In corn alone, over 30 billion worth of investment goes around the world every year, out of which Nigeria can have a sensible amount of this 30 billion if we have electricity and enabling laws with security, to take advantage of all we have along the value chain. If you get what I'm saying, presently in Nigeria, over 70% of post-harvest products are being lost to lack of.
Okay, I'm afraid, Joseph, I'm going to have to interrupt. We really do appreciate your calling in. Thank you very much. When Dr. Yusuf said in relation to corruption, that's a completely different ball game, big enough as it is as an issue. I'm sure you understood it. What was it? Is it that actually corruption doesn't impact the crisis that we find ourselves in, this inflation crisis that we find ourselves in, or did it mean something different? Perhaps I should have been asking him, but I just wanted an alternative flavor to the way people might see corruption and some of the pictures they're seeing and maybe jump to the wrong conclusion. But the doctor said corruption, big as it is, it's a completely different ballgame.
Well, I think it's very appropriate to widen the scope of discussion as he tried to do, really. Well, corruption, it's a Nigerian menace. It's a global problem, and until we address that, we may not be able to do much. The reality is that if you want
there was so much promise that corruption would be addressed no matter whose, whatever it is, how do they say it?
That's the,
no matter
that's
whose
the promise we got in 2014, 2015. The reality is this. We have to look at the economy as a total concept, kind of. If you don't find the leakages within the economy, find a way to deal with them, we'll continue to have inflation, we'll continue to have stunted growth. And ultimately, it will result in more difficulties.
So there's political will to do the right thing.
We must have the political will to do it. We must have the political will to
undertake. No matter who is benefited or not.
Necessary reforms to make government more efficient. We've not had any of such in the last 5-7 years. In fact, the reforms we made in 2015, we can't say government has been able to push them through. For instance, in customs. The reforms that the previous government, especially Obasanjo's government, initiated in customs, massive, brought in the containers, people, all kinds of scanning initiatives and co. We don't see much of that today.
Okay,
we
one
don't
moment,
tend to hear much of that. We only hear about contract award.
Exactly.
And these things are they're not adding up.
Okay, Mazio Korafo, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, our guest.
Thank you.
You see, sir, the issue Nigeria is facing today is that 80% of whatever we have in Nigeria, they are all imported, all the consumables. And all these consumables are produced. We don't produce up to 80%. If what we are consuming as produce is 80%, we will not suffer this. Now, look at what's happening in the Gulf, like the Ukraine. As of last week, the United States said they have sent grains to Africa. Now, when those grains came, how many would Africa, so let's say Nigeria, will get? Unless states, local government, go back to what we call enhancing their resources, that they have a comparative advantage. Now, ask yourself, what we are suffering today, like our speaker against the just said, the dollars, all these things, because of expectation of whatever the 80% of what we consume, the dollar rate continue increasing. As long as it continues, now you have to say, do you know that if we don't take time, before the end of this year, dollar will reach out to 1,000 naira. As far as Nigeria is concerned. Now, if that is so, who is going to suffer? I demand are suffering. People suffering it. Now look at the salary. I did that 2 days ago, last week, they said the Labour has trained the federal government to increase forecast. Even the 30,000 naira, which the governors are supposed to pay, they are not supposed to pay. They couldn't pay. They refused. When even the Paris fund they collected, they squandered the money, telling the states, Jack Robinson at the end of the story. What happened?
So these are part of the issues. Mazi, I've got to interrupt you. Forgive me for doing so, but thank you very much for calling in. No doubt it's also an invaluable perspective for us to add. Dr. Yusuf, it was Benga who called in from Abuja wanting to know, okay, we've seen how bad the problem is. So what should be done, what can be done to stem this galloping inflation?
Well, very quickly, because I know we are running out of time.
That's right.
First, we need to tackle the problem of insecurity, like just as one of your callers mentioned. Many of our farmers have been displaced. They can't go to farm. And no matter what we say, this economy, our food supply is sustained largely by these peasant farmers. So whatever it will take, the government needs to fix this problem of insecurity. Mm-hmm. Secondly, the CBN should embrace more market economy. The CBN should allow a market-reflective exchange rate. The CBN should stop this rationing administrative allocation of foreign exchange and micromanaging the economy. We should put an end to it so that this economy can adjust properly and attract more investments.
Okay, Dr. Yusuf, I'm going to have to interrupt you there. I beg your pardon, but I want to thank you very much. We'll take those 2 points. I know there are more, but as you said, you understand the problem we have. Thank you very much, Dr. Muda Yusuf, immediate past Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, for your insights this morning. Thank you very much for joining the program.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, did you want to add to Benga? It was Benga and Abuja's question, and Dr. Yusuf has just given us 2 indices. Are there others that you think?
Well, I would like to say that government should allow virtually every segment of the economy to function at optimal position, open up the economy, address the problem of insecurity, let people go back to the farm, open up the universities, they are sub-economies on their own. Let commerce flow. Let tourism flourish. Let every part of the economy begin to gain life back. Let's go back to how we used to run them and do them better. So that's the only way.
So the both of you have actually, fingered the policy-making engine as an area that could do with a bit of enhancement.
Well, we are running out of time.
Indeed,
I want to say something. Some of the policies hindering growth are not even what we should call policies in the first instance. They are mere presidential pronouncements. Don't give dollars to anybody. Then it becomes a policy. Nobody has gone to him and said, no, this will not work, or let's sit down and formulate a more robust policy towards addressing this problem. So presidential pronouncements have been a very big challenge to this economy.
Thank you very much. We're going to have to leave it there, Mr. Ayodeji, economist. Thank you very much. And I've already thanked Dr. Muda Yusuf. And, it's one of those big subjects. We could do it for 2 hours. So we're going to have to leave it here, just sort of earmarking that the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics says to us we're at 19.64%, and the 2 economists have tried to give us perspective. Please join us tomorrow for a fresh edition of the program. I'm Yori Folarin. Bye-bye for now.